Welcome to the first episode of the CIV program. The conversation is ventilation. How are you today? We're coming to you live from Spare Bedroom Studios. And as you can see, it's Hawaiian Shirt Day here at the studio. So, welcome everyone. In this episode, we're going to get into how CIV became CIV, where it all started. It's hard to get on the road and start headed somewhere unless you understand where you've been and how it all started. So we're going to get into it. Also, I'd like to take a quick second and dedicate this to a line of duty death. Thomas Berry out in Delaware, a 23-year-old first responder firefighter. He's with Ellendale and Georgetown Fire Company. He was killed while stopping and assisting a motor vehicle accident on Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. So this episode is going to be for him, and we're all going to take a little sip for him. All right. So Thomas Berry, rest in peace, my friend. And our hearts and our thoughts are with Delaware and Georgetown Fire Company and Ellendale. So let's get right into it. Here we go. All right, welcome back to the CIV program, video podcast. We are now on Apple Podcast and Spotify. So if you're looking for just the audio, because you don't want to look at my big head, head on over to Apple Podcast or Spotify and go ahead and download it. Check it out. Give it a listen. Okay. Back about a year and a half ago, I was getting up at the station after my shift was over to have coffee with the guys. I like to sit there and rattle their cages a little bit and just get them all riled up, poke at them, make up things that the chief didn't say, and just get them fired up, because they got to sit there for 48 hours and just stew on it and spend half the day figuring out if what I said was right or wrong. So I'm having some coffee here, radio check, and they're meeting up at Station 1 for a CISD meeting, Critical Incident Stress Debriefing. And I said, well, what happened? They have a call, bad call, obviously. He said, yeah, there was a child drowning. I said, oh, shit. So I said, well, I want to go to that. So I got dressed real quick and ran up to Station 1. Walked in. The meeting was already in progress. Okay, I walked into a room full of 2 engines, I believe it was. 1 and 3. May be mistaken, but I believe it was 1 and 3. And these guys were working through the process of, what happened and working through the feelings and the emotions and just kind of going through the call. I quietly just sat down and listened. And during the process of hearing these guys speak and share and work through those things, I had a epiphany is the word. And so I raised my hand at the end when it was kind of coming to an end. I said, guys, you mind if I say something? And they're like, no, please. I said, I realize I wasn't on that call with you, obviously, but I said, I ran that call. And I was shooting from the hip like I do with most of my things, including this podcast. And I started sharing how I knew how they felt because 15 years prior, I ran a 2 or 3 year old little boy was in a pool and I pulled him out of the pool and he, a child drowning. And I talked about briefly, just what I went through and how I felt and just very quickly. But I realized when I was standing there that we all run these calls and I don't care what city you're from. It can be a volunteer department. It could be FDNY. When you run a child, it hits you. It goes to the core. And there's not a first responder on this planet who's not a complete psychopath that will argue with that. And I realize that we spend a lot of time and a lot of effort not talking to each other about these calls, but we're all running these calls. And they very rarely make the paper. They very rarely make the news. Your wife, your children, when you get home, have no idea, that a 3-year-old drowned or what you were doing at work. And so it's a very it's a very weird thing to where we kind of take it and you file it and you think you're alone and you really don't want to talk about it. You just kind of put it in here. And what's weird is we're all walking around with the same story, but none of us are sharing with each other and talking about it. And so that was the epiphany, and it rattled me inside and in my head, and my wife can attest to this. It really shook me, and it kept being a conversation a lot. It came up, and for the next like 6 months, things would happen, and then it would keep coming back. I was trying full transparency. I don't want to do any of this. I really didn't want to even admit that there's a problem. I didn't want to admit that I think I have something we can do to fix it. I didn't want to have these conversations. I still kind of don't. And the reason is it would be a lot easier for me to just do my last 4 and then go home. But with some self-reflection and some time and conversations with others, I'm realizing that's not going to happen. I'm not just going to retire in 4 years and then just be done and it's over and next chapter. I'm going to take it with me. And some of these retired guys that we're talking to and that we're hopefully going to get, on the podcast or have some conversations with, they're letting us know that, no, they're still with you. You're not going to. So I have to do something about this. It has to be said. It has to be shared. I'm willing to be the guy. If you need to make fun of somebody, you can make fun of me. If you need to laugh or, you can laugh at me. But I think that if you were to take 100 first responders and put them in a room, if you're getting 5 in the back that are talking shit and chuckling and making jokes, that's fine. Okay. Because there's 95 listening. And out of those 95, there's probably 20 or 30 that don't want to really have a conversation, but they want to listen. They're always listening. And you never know what you're saying on how that could really help somebody who's listening, especially these rookies. And it doesn't just have to be the rookies. We're finding out that these senior guys need to hear it just as much as the new guy. And so you never know. So we're going to put it out there. We are putting it out there. And if you need to laugh, you can laugh right here. If you need to talk smack, you can talk smack right here. But I think we're onto something, and I think it's a good thing. So back to the story. And so that happened. A few months later, I'm doing my consumption course PT test, and some chiefs pulled me aside and said, "Hey, we have 2 rookies that ran a child, okay, and we're very concerned about them. We want you to talk to them." And I said, I'm like, why me? Well, one of the chiefs brought up, my conversation at the CISD meeting, and they said, they respect you. You're a senior guy. You're relatable. You have a high school education barely, so they can, they don't feel intimidated by you, So I guess I have this thing, and they're like, so just please, we're going to send them out to you one at a time for a week to work, the full shifts with you. And at that time we were working 24-hour shifts. So I got roughly 48 hours, 2 shifts in a week with each of these kids. And when I say kids, I mean young men that have less than, 24 months into their career. So these are young kids. Well, one of them, who I would consider a dear friend, his father is one of my best friends. We play hockey together. We've coached hockey together. We travel, we ski. I know his family. I've watched this kid grow up. He's now working at the fire department. He's on at that time, he was on his 3rd infant in a 24-month career. Well, like I said, or may have said earlier, I don't know. You're only a complete psychopath would not be affected by children. This rookie has had 3 right off the bat. And so he was hurting. So he comes out, we're working together. We start having these conversations, just, really low key, nothing serious, just sharing. Okay. And I brought up the child in the pool that I ran, and he started sharing what happened on his call and, hey, what did you do? What could we have done better? just going through, the motions of like walking through step by step. Because one of the things too is, as you know, if you're a first responder, I think we always second guess ourselves. Like, I could have been a little quicker over there. What if we would have pushed this drug, or what if we would have not been stopped by the train? Or sometimes we get in our heads and, so he was working through that. And the pivotal moment that when I go back and I look at the CIV history and say, where did this start? It started with the boy in the pool story at the CISD meeting. It didn't really, really start until I ran face first into the wall when that rookie looked at me when we were working together, and he said, I feel like I'm in a room that's slowly filling up with smoke, and it's getting harder and harder to breathe. Okay. I wrote it down word for word. That's what came out of his mouth. And I was like, holy shit. Right? This is a guy who's reaching out and just letting you know it's hard to breathe. Okay. And luckily, I had my wits about me, and I said, okay. I said, well, what did we learn in recruit school? What did you learn when you just went through recruit school 2 years ago? What do we do when we get to a structure fire? And it's ventilate. Vertical, horizontal, positive pressure, whatever. Okay, ventilation. And he knew the answer. He said ventilate. And I said, okay. I said, well, why do we ventilate? And through our conversation, it came out that, we do that. It's safer for the first responders, the firefighters and stuff, to operate in the area. Okay. Superheated gases, the smoke, the toxins, visibility wise. So it's safer for us to be there, and it's safer for anyone who's possibly trapped in the room, that any victims. Okay. It's safer for them. Gives us a better chance to see them, find them, get them out. Okay. So it's a safety thing. And quickly we realized that we were hitting our heads on the wall of something. And I looked at him and I said, what if this conversation that we're having right now, just two guys sitting in recliners in the day room at a fire station, but this conversation right now, what if that is your way of ventilating that room, your room? And that was it. That was 100-mile-an-hour head-on crash into a brick wall. We knew what we had. And I wrote down CIV, and I said, conversation is ventilation. I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I still have it. And I wrote down his quote word for word. And then I quickly sketched out the hazmat placard, which is our symbol now. And I put CIV and 343 and the crossed axes in it. Not crosses, the crossed axes. So I knew that, as simple as it was, that was it. It's that easy. Conversation. And for the next several months, I tried desperately to avoid it and to not have it be a part of me and to be a project. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to just sit quietly with my head down and do my 4 years and go home. And it kept coming up, and it kept nagging at me, and it kept saying, Shimmick, get off your ass. This is something you have to do. It has to be spoken about. We have to have some conversations. So in that 6 months to, 6-8 months when I was lollygagging about it, we had some great one-on-one conversations. We had some great crew conversations. We had multi-crew conversations. I started realizing that people were really wanting to have these conversations. Simple as that. Preschool stuff. Okay. And I kept coming home often and telling my wife it happened again, CIV. There were times where I would be coming home late from shift, and whether it was one person or a group of people, we're having what I call a CIV, a CIV moment. And I would text my wife CIV. And that was her way of knowing, hey, we're into some conversation. I'm going to be late, or I'm not going to be home at my normal time. It was just my way of telling her we're having a moment. Okay. There were people that would come to my house and have a CIV moment, but CIVing turned into a verb and an adjective and a noun. And it's like, well, crap, we got to do something about it. So last May was Mental Health Awareness Month. I decided to put my big boy pants on, put together a PowerPoint presentation, and present it to the department. So I went to the chiefs, told them what I had. They loved it. A lot of really good responses from them. And they said, what do you need from me? And I said, well, I want to take their PT time, because we get 1.5 hours to 2 hours every shift. We're supposed to. And 2 engines at a time came down into the conference room, and we sat around in a circle at the table, and I presented what I had. And it was very rude and rough, but it was my first attempt at saying, I'm here, I got to share this. Okay. And I did. Had a really good response. Didn't have really any negative to my face. I haven't heard any negative chatter about it. And a lot of positive things have come. A lot of people have pulled me aside privately and said some things and said some positive things and thanked me, or added to the conversation, added to the program. So it continues to feed itself and says, I need this, I want this, we need this, we want to hear more, we want to talk more. And I don't know what else to do but to just keep it rolling. So here we are. Somebody in those classes recommended this needs to be a podcast. Never dawned on me that I'd ever have my big fat head on a camera talking about this, but here we are. Because, obviously with the internet not being a fad that I thought it would be, it seems like it's going to stick around, and it's an easy way to share. I got a cousin at San Diego Fire. Okay. He's 2,000 plus miles away from me. You can share this clip, share it with your crew, share it with your friends. And so it's kind of weird, but it's good. And I know we're on a great path, and it all started in the fire station. It all started with the guys, and it all started with those rookies, having some conversations and being open and saying some things that I could not overlook. And, so it got me thinking about my career and where some of the things I've been through personally on calls, some of the things that I haven't dealt with. I realize, to be completely transparent, that my career path might have been a little different if back in 2004, one of the first real major calls, we still haven't talked about it. So I'm going to reach out to those guys and have a conversation about that. So it really got me thinking about my career. It also got me thinking about these young men. Some of these kids are 20, some of these kids live at home, and it got me thinking about where they're going to be in 20 years when I'm not here. How are they going to be? How are they going to feel? It's become a very personal project, and I'm willing to stick my neck out and be laughed at if I need to be laughed at. But I think we have a lot of first responders that would love to have an outlet and have it be okay to have a conversation. I don't know. It's weird to me, and I think it's always going to be weird that we're literally having a conversation about how we need to have more conversations. Okay. Because one of the things in the PowerPoint in our conversations with 2 engine companies at a time, which I went through that, I had that conversation 12 times, because we have 8 stations in our city, 3 shifts of 8 stations. And one of the things that kept coming up is blue shirts get blue shirts. And I was using that as a way to say, isn't it funny how we can all run the same call, and not only do we have different experiences on that call based on, a lot of things, how long we've been doing this, there's a lot of factors in what can determine a good call or a bad call or how we react to them. But we're all running these calls together. And then when we get done, we isolate ourselves and we don't talk about these things. And, 2004, when Hurricane Ivan came through North Alabama here, and we had one of the worst. We had a fire, and we'll get into that at another podcast. But one of my most traumatic calls was a complete fail. And that was 21 years ago, 20 years ago. So I know for a fact that the posturing and the things that we like to do for each other, like, I'm okay, you're okay, fine, suck it up. It's going to add up, and it's going to come out eventually. Someday, I believe we all look in the mirror and we may not recognize the person staring back at us. And I think that's a very relatable thing. And if we're being honest with ourselves, I think a lot of us go, yeah, drinking problems, drugs and alcohol are a big problem for first responders. Divorce rate is through the roof. We're cheating on our wives and husbands faster than normal and more than normal. A lot of us have, some pill problems, some illegal drug problems. A lot of us are hurting. A lot of us are angry. We got short tempers. We've got a lot of this stuff built up, and it's so silly to think that just have a conversation about it. Let's just talk about it. Because if there's somebody over here in the corner listening going, oh, well, if Shimmick feels that way, maybe it's okay that I feel that way about that call. Or, we'll get into in another episode about, the boy in the pool. I'll dive a little more into that about, those guys, when I went to their CISD meeting, they were having these feelings. And I'm like, yeah, 15 years ago, I've had those feelings. I ran that call. And like I said, that day I realized I ran that call, but I didn't run that call. Well, then you start thinking of all the departments, all the first responders, all the EMS, all the doctors, all the nurses, everybody's running the same things and dealing with the same things, but nobody really wants to get together or share it or talk about it or admit that a 2-year-old in a pool has affected you, or why am I so angry? There's so many things, and it's conversation. Conversation is ventilation. Kindergarten stuff. Okay. Absolute kindergarten stuff. I'm a little embarrassed that it took almost 21 years to realize it. My career is almost over, but I think we're heading in a very positive direction. And I think that a lot of people, if we can change kind of the mentality in my department, which I see happening already, and we can create, better rookie firemen someday when they're going to be better lieutenants. And then they're going to turn around and they're going to look at their new guys differently because of the things that we're all doing right now to make this better. So, all right, enough jibber jabbering. That's where we started. Okay. So, like I said, or may not have said, we're available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for all you audio only guys and girls, and YouTube, of course, for the video podcast. I'm very thankful for every single person that wants to take a few minutes out of their day to watch or listen. Please share, and just, you never know who needs to hear it. You never know who wants to join in the conversation, and you never really know who's just itching to have somebody have a conversation with. It's amazing. It's a really powerful thing. It's a simple thing. We're here for each other. We say we have a brotherhood. We say we're a team. We say we're this and that. But we've been doing a lot of posturing over the years, and it's time to fix that. It's time to break that stigma of, you're weak if you talk about it. The old stigma, rub some dirt on it is not going to work. I don't think that's the answer. I know that's not the answer, and we're going to try to fix that. Hopefully one podcast and one conversation at a time. So thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. If you're over on Apple Podcast or Spotify, thanks for listening. If you're on YouTube, thanks for looking at my big head for 23 minutes or so. And I love you. Stay safe, stay together, and we'll see you on the next one.